think the latest, the ones that I am still heartbroken over are the Samoan measles stories. And, you know, I still feel a bit guilty, and I came out with a, you know, you as a reporter, you just go and cover it. You've got to stay focused. We're not, it's not about us, you know, it's about these poor people, they're losing children, you know. So there's no room for a lot of emotion. If you're going to do your job properly, you just got to swallow it, you know, get it together. But you know, it was hard. There were a lot of dying children, and we saw a lot of death. And when I came back after doing 2 trips up there, and I was quite devastated by what we saw. And then we heard that we'd been to see this mum, and she'd had a baby who had measles, and she immediately took the child to the hospital, and the child survived. And her story was, please take your children to the hospital. Now, she had another sick child. When we were interviewing her, there's another sick child there, and we're like, is your child all right? Oh, yes, it's all right. We're just giving natural medicine. He'll be all right, or if they get sick, we'll take them. Anyway, as we're walking out of this little compound, there was 3 other houses, and these mothers came running up to us. Please, you've got to help us. You've got to help us. And it's that role when you're a reporter, but you've got to help. And so we went and had a look, and there were 3 extremely sick, dying children, and they could barely breathe, and we knew it was bad. And so what we did is we quickly, but not immediately, so we're interviewing the mothers, did real quick interviews. I said, let's just quickly get this and film them. And as we were looking at it, I said, I think we've got to wind this up. Like, they look like really sick. Now, these guys had no phones, because there's no phone service up there, right? It was up in the middle of nowhere. They had they're not allowed on the roads, and they had no vehicles anyway. And because it was the 2-day lockdown, so no one's allowed out on the roads, no buses. So they couldn't get their children. Yeah. So we jumped. I knew that there'd be a Ministry of Health team. They were coming around to give vaccinations. So we jumped in our car, and I said, we've just got to go. And so we raced down, and we're about 10 minutes out of the road, going down the road, going like the clappers, thinking these kids are sicker than we thought. And we see the Ministry of Health coming up, this team, a bus, and so I jumped out of the car, and I ran down the road and stopped them, and I said, you've got to come, and took them up to this house, and they looked at these kids, and they were like, yeah. And so this guy, he jumped in his van, and he was the team leader, and he went 20 minutes to get to make a call to ring for the ambulance to come. And so we filmed it all on the road, but of course we never said that we went and helped, because that, come on, it's a bit of, that's not about us. There's some reporters who would have, but, that's not how I do it. And so it was, and so they took these kids away, and we found out that, and feeling quite pleased because the kids survived. We heard, my friend rang me, another reporter friend who I work with, because you've got to work with the locals on the ground, because they know they're better than we are. She writes, Barb, they've survived, Oh, thank goodness, gosh, we did something special that day. No, because we forgot about the child next door, the sick child next door. I forgot. I completely forgot, because we're so tied up with these extremely sick children. We heard that child died, and I felt so guilty and so bad. So bad, yeah. My cameraman told me that he'd mentioned it that there's another child next door, but they were so intent on helping these 2 very sick children. Yeah, so, you got to deal with stuff like that. So I came back, and I was a bit of a mess, and whatever I am, I always think, wow, imagine those parents, so many children, over 80 children dead in this one country, and what a disaster. What a disaster. And I guess with that burden or with that knowledge and what I saw during COVID, I was really scared for our people, like really scared, because I saw how quickly the measles spread. And it could have been so bad for us. It could have been so bad.
Because of the measles, do you think that in Samoa, like the reaction to the COVID sort of
over the top, completely, 100%, 100%. It'll be a long time before they open their borders, would be my guess. Although, I mean, depends what happens with the government, doesn't it? Because we don't know yet. But people are very conservative now. One of the biggest things that happened that shouldn't have happened is that they used to have these women's groups, and the nurses would go to the women's groups up in the villages, different villages, and they'd check the children, check their teeth and their hair and everything, and give them their vaccinations. And it was, but that was all taken away from the villages and taken to the main hospital. Now, a lot of people didn't have the money to get from their village to the main hospital. And so a lot of the kids weren't getting vaccinated. It wasn't that easy. And sometimes I think our traditional ways, the way we do things is there's a reason for it. And I think that, it would have been better if it hadn't been taken out of the women's groups and the nurses.
Was this ever brought up? I mean, because...
Yeah, it was. I did a story on it, actually. I was pretty wild about it. Well, actually, it wasn't me being wild about it. It was mentioned. Someone mentioned it to me, and I was like, are you serious? Like, a lot of people, it's so divorced from your people, because these people, they live so far up, and people saying, oh, they should have called for why didn't they call for an ambulance? Well, they didn't have cell phone service. They've got a phone. There's no cell phone service. They're not allowed to, even if they had a car, they're not allowed to be in a car, but they would have broken the law to go, sure. But there's no buses. It's not easy. And I just think sometimes, we forget how people live and how people are, and compassion, and just going back to the traditional ways in some areas, not in all areas, but in some areas would be good, because those women knew what they're doing.
Just going back to the elections,
you've
seen